Imagine standing in a dim, cool cave on the southern tip of Africa. Waves crash against cliffs outside. It's 100,000 years ago, nearly 95,000 years. Before the pyramids, before writing, before cities, before anything we'd call civilization. And yet, inside this cave, a human, someone with hands just like yours, sits down, picks up a piece of red ochre stone, and does something no creature on Earth has ever done before. They carve a pattern into it. Not randomly, deliberately, cross-hatched lines, repeating, spaced with intention. They just built the world's first computer. Not a machine with wires and chips, but something arguably more incredible. The first physical device ever used by a living being to store, encode, and transmit information outside of a living brain. And that single act, buried for 100,000 years. In a place now called Blombos Cave, may be the true starting point of everything you're doing. Right now, reading this sentence, understanding these symbols, letting marks on a surface rewire the thoughts inside your skull. Before we go further, if stories like this genuinely blow your mind, hit subscribe now, because this channel exists to hunt down the moments in history where humanity quietly changed forever. And trust me, this is one of the biggest ones nobody teaches you in school. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I want to know who's on this journey with me. Here's the raw truth scientists uncovered. In 2002, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood and his team pulled 2 engraved ochre pieces out of Blombos Cave, South Africa. Carbon and thermoluminescence dating placed them at roughly 100,000 to 75,000 years. That number matters more than it sounds. At that point, Homo sapiens had already existed for tens of thousands of years, but had left almost no evidence of symbolic thinking. No art, no abstract marks. No proof that anyone was thinking beyond the next meal, the next hunt, the next threat. Then suddenly a geometric pattern, carved with a sharpened point on purpose, for a reason we still don't fully understand. Some researchers believe it was decorative. Others argue it was something closer to a code, a way to represent an idea, a count, a story, a warning, using symbols instead of speech. Which means this ochre stone wasn't just art, it was data storage. Think about what a computer actually does at its core. It takes information, encodes it into a physical form, stores it, and allows that information to be retrieved later by someone else. That is exactly what this ancient human did with a rock and a sharp stone tool. No electricity, no silicon, just ochre, intention, and a species whose brain had just crossed a threshold no other animal ever had. And here's the part that should give you chills. This happened roughly 100,000 years before. Sumerians invented writing, and around 300 years before, Steve Jobs held up an iPhone. Somewhere in that gap, the descendants of the person who carved that stone went from scratching lines on rocks to building devices that put the sum of human knowledge in your pocket. We are not separate from that moment in the cave. We are that moment still unfolding. So let's ask the real question. Why does this matter to your brain? Sitting here in 2026, scrolling on a device, more powerful than every computer NASA used to land on the moon combined? Because what happened at Blombos Cave wasn't just an isolated artifact. It was evidence of a cognitive revolution. Neuroscientists and archaeologists now believe this period, roughly 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, marks what's called the cognitive leap, or symbolic explosion in early Homo sapiens. This is the moment our species' brains began doing something genuinely new, externalizing thought. Here's what that means in plain terms. Every animal on Earth can communicate. Bees dance to show direction. Whales sing across oceans. But almost no other species can take an abstract idea, a number, a story, a warning, and lock it into a physical object that another mind can decode later, without the original creator even being present. That's not communication. That's memory storage outside the body. That's the seed of every hard drive, every book, every USB stick, every cloud server humming in a data center right now. Researchers like archaeologist April, Nowell, and cognitive scientist Merlin Donald have proposed that this symbolic capability required a specific evolutionary shift, the ability to hold an abstract mental representation and translate it into a durable external form. In simpler words, your brain learning to say, I can put my thoughts outside my head, and they'll still exist when I'm gone. That's the exact same principle behind a modern hard drive. A hard drive takes electrical signals, your thoughts, essentially, once you've typed them, and converts them into magnetic patterns on a spinning disk. So the information survives even after you turn the computer off. The ochre engraving did the same job with a rock and a blade. 100,000 years earlier, with zero electricity and zero prior example to learn from, and it wasn't a one-off. Since Blombos archaeologists have found similar engraved ochre pieces, shell beads pierced and strung with clear intentional patterns at school in Carve, caves in Israel dated, close to 100,000 years old, and ostrich eggshell message containers in South Africa with etched geometric codes dating back around 60,000 years, some showing consistent symbol repetition across different sites, suggesting a shared symbolic language was spreading across early human populations. Here's a question for you. Drop your answer in the comments. If you had to invent a way to store important information with only a rock and a sharp stone, no writing system, no language for symbols yet invented, what would you carve and why? Take a second and really think about that, because that's the exact problem our ancestors solved, and solving it changed the trajectory of the species. Symbolic thought didn't just enable art, it enabled planning, teaching, trade, ritual, and eventually complex society. Every human institution you rely on, money, law, religion, science, depends on the ability to encode abstract meaning into physical symbols that outlive the person who made them. The engraved ochre stone isn't just old, it's the ancestor of every 1 and 0 flowing through the phone in your hand right now. Here's where this story stops, being ancient history, and becomes something deeply, uncomfortably relevant to your life right now. Every time you save a photo, send a voice note, or back up your phone to the cloud, you're doing exactly what that person in Blombos Cave did 100,000 years ago, taking something that only exists in a mind and forcing it into a form that survives without you. The tools changed. Ochre became ink, ink became punch cards became silicon transistors smaller than a virus. But the core act, externalizing thought into durable, retrievable symbols, and has not changed even once in 100,000 years. That's the surprising truth researchers keep circling back to. Technology didn't start with electricity. It started with the discovery that a mind could leave a trace of itself behind. The engraved ochre stone is arguably the true version 1.0 of every computer, phone, and server farm on the planet. Silicon Valley didn't invent the concept of information storage. It just built a much faster version of a 100-year-old idea. And there's a sobering angle here too. Anthropologists studying this period point out something almost poetic. The humans who carved those first symbols had no idea what they were starting. They weren't trying to invent computing. They were probably trying to remember a count, mark territory, signal identity, or tell a story to someone who wasn't there yet. It was small. It was local. It was human. Yet that small act cascaded, generation after generation. Idea layered on idea, into satellites, into the internet, into AI systems writing scripts like this one. It's a reminder that we rarely recognize the moments that will define the future while we're living through them, somewhere on Earth right now. In 2026, someone is doing something that seems just as small, and it might be just as historic as that cave carving, and we won't know for another 100,000 years. There's also a psychological layer worth sitting with. Why did early humans need this at all? Some researchers argue that symbolic marking emerged from a very human fear, the fear of being forgotten, of knowledge dying with the person who held it. That ochre stone might be one of the earliest recorded acts of a species trying to defeat its own mortality by leaving something behind. Sound familiar? It's the same reason you post online. Write journals, send texts you hope someone keeps. We're still doing what that person in the cave did, just with better tools. So the next time your phone glitches, your laptop lags, or your cloud storage fills up, remember? You're frustrated with the great, add about 4,000 more greats. Grandchild of a scratched piece of red rock in a South African cave. And it all started because one human, tens of thousands of years before writing existed, decided their thoughts deserved to outlive the moment. If this story shifted how you see the phone in your hand, hit subscribe, because next time, we're diving into a discovery even stranger. The ancient civilization that may have mapped the stars 6,000 years before astronomy was supposed to exist, and how modern scientists accidentally proved they were right. You will not want to miss that one. Until then, stay curious.